Thus, if one who is born a slave, in compliance with the apostle's heartfelt admonition, for Christ did not come in order to abolish slavery, although this will follow and will be a result of his coming. He is not concerned about it, and merely chooses freedom if it is offered. Then he bears the heavy burden lightly. How heavy this burden is, the unhappy slave knows best, and human sympathy understands it with him. If he groans under the burden, as humanity groans with him, then he bears the burden heavily. If he patiently submits to his fate, and patiently hopes for freedom, then he still does not bear the burden lightly. But the meek, who has had the courage really to believe in spiritual freedom, bears the heavy burden lightly. He neither relinquishes the hope of freedom, nor does he expect it. The question which is rightly called decisive, the question about freedom, the question which for a slave-born individual may indeed be called a vital question of being or not being. This mortal or life-giving question the meek handles so easily, as if it did not concern him, and yet in another way so easily that in a way it does concern him, for he says, "My being born a slave does not concern me, but if I can become free, then would I preferably choose that." To bite at the chain is to bear it heavily, to ridicule the chain is also to bear it heavily. Patiently to endure the chain is still not bearing it lightly, but slave-born to bear the bond of slavery as a free man may carry a chain. That is bearing it lightly. And meekness is always like this. As one sometimes sees with wonder what thrift can do with a penny, so is meekness strongest in working slowly, and thereby making the heavy light. As a skeptic, in anxious parsimony, scarcely dares tread upon the earth, dares deny nothing and affirm nothing, lest he go too far. So the meek has also the parsimony of eternity, but he is not anxious, for on the contrary he is confident. He is not doubting but staunchly believing. He breathes in faith soundly and freely, and yet his courage is so meek that what he has to bear looks like a sheer insignificance. It is indeed true that every state of mind brings forth that which it is, indubitably creates the task in likeness with itself. One cannot say, "Where there is great danger, there is always a courageous man." But conversely, where there is a courageous man, there is sure to be great danger. That is, he needs it, he requires it. The instinct of courage for self-preservation in the courageous man needs it. The task varies, depending on the one who performs it. The same danger which is perhaps overcome by a disheartened soul becomes perceptibly greater when it is a courageous man who overcomes it. The same injustice which is sustained by a vacillating, unreliable man becomes appreciably greater when it happens to a righteous man. The same leap which a fugitive makes, impelled by fear, becomes visibly higher when a dancer does it with ease. And thus courage makes the danger great and overcomes it. Magnanimity regards the injustice as paltry and rises above it. Patience makes the burden heavy and bears it, but meekness makes the burden light and bears it lightly. That is why, humanly speaking, it is an ungrateful task to be meek. For meekness moves so quietly forward that no one notices the heavy burden. Not even the one who lays the burden on the meek really realizes it. Courage secures its compensation through the visibility of the victory, magnanimity through the haughtiness of its glance, patience through the signs of suffering. But meekness is unrecognizable. Thus the meek slave conceals by his meekness the injustice of his master, for it looks as if the slave were very comfortable with his master, which he also is, by the help of meekness. If, therefore, a traveler saw how slaves groan under the bondage, then he would become observant. his sympathy would awaken. He would give a glowing description of the horrors of slavery. But the meek slave he would not notice. He might possibly even believe that it was the master who was good. Thus, when the gentle woman meekly bears all the difficulties and caprices and insults of her husband, perhaps his disloyalty, does it not then look? Still, what good does it do to speak about how it looks? It can indeed not be seen. If she bears it with patience, then it may perhaps be seen, but wherever she lives, this meek woman, there is seen only a happy marriage, only a beloved husband, and a wife who is happy in her home and happy with her husband. Moreover, she is happy, even if not happy with her husband, yet she is still blessed in her meekness.